Product placement is fine, but they should be paying you if you're
Right?
gonna advertise. They should be
Yeah,
giving.
they should really be sponsoring me.
Ladies and gentlemen, joined here today by Mr. Jack Donovan. I know you, Jack, as a public speaker through the 21 convention, and I've been keeping up with you through your Instagram and through your blog, predominantly as a writer. Would you say you're a writer? Is that how you describe yourself predominantly?
Yeah, I'm definitely a writer first.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an artist who writes. Actually, is that what I like to say? But
An artist who writes, yeah.
yeah.
Just to get some of the insanity out, you've got to write it down.
Yeah, it's just something I fell into doing years ago, and I guess I'm kind of good at it at this point. So I kind of keep doing it.
For the people who are listening, where's the best place for them to go look up where they can find your writing online, and they can look that up as we're talking?
Well, my website is jack-donovan.com, and I also like Instagram a lot. So I'm on Instagram at Start the World.
Very cool. Very cool. Start the world at Instagram. That is jack-donovan.com. I highly recommend Jack's writing. Speaking to you last year, I think it was last year or early this year, it set the wheels in motion for me. We were talking about what you do in life and things, and it actually got me off my arse to get my book finished as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I realized that, I'm reading small pieces. You do say like short essays of yours, a few paragraphs, and think, fuck, if it's well written, a well-written piece can really slide into your consciousness and nestle there, and it can really affect the way you think about the world.
Absolutely. And I mean, since we're talking about magic on this one, possibly, uh, it's a little odd, but I think I always say my writing was inspired by two people in different ways. I learned to write from Pat Buchanan, who wrote speeches for Nixon, and he writes tight little essays, like up to, like 1,200 to 2,000 words. I think is a sweet spot for a lot of people.
Right.
And, he wrote speeches for Nixon, so he knows what he's doing, and then Anton LaVey,
Oh,
actually. So if you read through his essays, I mean, there was a time when I was more involved in that kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
And, but his essays, he wrote a lot of essays for his newsletters and so forth. And they're short, punchy things that have one thought.
Okay.
If you can communicate one thought with one good headline, one thing that encapsulates that thought, then people digest the whole thing. Whereas if you go all over, everywhere, a lot of people, and I do this too, is I've been doing it recently just for current events, more like a column. Right. But if you can write a good punchy essay, has one good idea.
Yeah, that's the style. It's sort of like it's got a Zen flavor to it, but it has an American flavor to it in the sort of the like Johnny Cash, when he was praised, it wasn't because it was particularly flowery. It was actually quite a minimalist sort of a sound. There's like, this is the song, this is the message, boom, there it is. Now, as far as magic goes, you mentioned Anton LaVey there. He was the Church of Satan, right?
Right.
Can you, a lot of people, they hear that and they freak the fuck out. Can you explain a little bit about the Church of Satan to people?
Well, I mean, I haven't been involved in anything like that for years, but I did, I went through a period where I was doing that. And I always describe it kind of as maybe atheism for people who like horror movies.
Right.
But, it's, but obviously there was an interest, I think, especially in his early days, in magic and ritual and so forth. And he was part of a lot of writers in the 60s who were talking about those kind of ideas, whether it's talking about a lot of Jungian things and archetypes and ritual and the importance of ritual in human life, and there were a lot of people talking about that at that time and mixing it with psychology, which was new. And so I think he influenced my perspective in a lot of ways in terms of melding the idea of psychology and where it meets with ritual, and acknowledging that those two things are very much the same thing. There's a big overlap there.
Yeah, between ritual and psychology. I just thought it's ironic, given the times we're in now, how we actually connected was in a restaurant devoted to Soviet Russia.
Exactly. Yeah, and of the corruption of Soviet, right? That was the theme of the corruption of. It was the whole theme was like all the head guys of state in there having their filet mignon and their high end meals while all the people were standing in line for bread.
This is a Soviet themed restaurant in Warsaw, ladies and gents. It was a good restaurant, but the dishes, the extremely extravagant dishes, are named after the heads of state that they allegedly love to gorge themselves on. And I had a slightly embarrassing conversation with Jack where I was talking to somebody else. We were talking about ritual magic, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm into magic and have been for a number of years." And I got into a conversation with Jack, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I do ritual magic. Sometimes we'll sacrifice a goat." And I was like, "Whoa, hang on a second." I'm talking about a very moderate middle class writing down of intent on a piece of paper type of magic. So you've obviously over the years gone quite a bit deeper into this.
Yeah. I mean, and it's still to this day. I mean, I'm experimenting with forms of what I'm doing and so forth, and whether it's whether you're doing some kind of magic that has intent, or you're doing kind of an honoring of a principle or a god or so forth. I'm very interested in all that. I mean, I say it speaks to the artist in me,
right?
And the ideas, all these archetypes and so forth, and bringing them together and playing with them, and because there is something beautiful about whether it's the Catholic Mass or religion speaks in pictures and poetry, and I think that that is something that is lost in modern life, and there's a need for it somewhere. And so, looking back at some of the ways that people used to do things has always been pretty inspiring for me.
So, for people who aren't familiar with the discipline, how do you describe magic to normies, to people who aren't into it, or do you avoid that conversation?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all depends on what you want out of it. Like I said, ritual and magic maybe could even be two different things. Mm-hmm. Although I like, when I see I think it's transubstantiation. I think whatever and they turn the wine into the blood of, and that's magic. I mean, that's what they're doing is they're here creating this symbolic thing, so people can connect with it in a different way. Mm-hmm. And as far as magic, personally, for me, I think it's all about intent and manifesting your intent in some way. It's not about, I wish I could throw fireballs and levitate, but that's not really what I'm talking about. That's obviously. I mean, maybe I'm just not at that level yet. I don't know. But keep going. No, it's not Gandalf stuff. For me, it's more ritual, and especially if you're talking with a group of guys and you're doing a group ritual. I think I always call it the telos in philosophical language. Like, what's the end? Like, where are we trying to get to? Right. And you're kind of taking people through an emotional process, because that's what ritual really is. Yeah. And you're talking in symbols to get them to a different mental state. Yeah. And where they can manifest, hopefully, what they're trying to manifest.
Right. In that context of the description you've just given me, what do you think of the law of attraction?
I don't care. I mean, whatever. I mean, I don't think that just sitting around like wishing that good things are going to happen to you is really, it doesn't seem to work. Right. It's kind of in the way that, people pray and, and they pray, and no matter what happens to them, they always say like, well, that's what God wanted. And, it's like, well, the people who pray the most seem to have the crappiest lives sometimes. I don't know, like...
something about a correlation between passively hoping and...
I think so. Well. Yeah, I think a lot of the tactical guys, that's one of his slogans. I think it's Ian Sternbeck. No. It's a different guy. It's the courses of action guy, but his slogan is hope is not a course of action. And that's very much what people are just doing. Hoping is just wishing. Right. Yeah. And, I think that if you're doing any kind of magic or ritual, I mean, you have to be really invested in it,
Right.
and that you're going to actually work for that intent to happen, not just sit down and wish for things. You know, like, because that's like, you know, waiting for like daddy or mommy to bring you some magical thing, you know, some outcome, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, and it's very popular even in meditation circles now. There's that one guy, I think Dispenza, I think is his name, but who does meditation, and it's very similar concept. Like, you know, like if you sit and meditate and feel the good things that are going to happen to you, then they're going to happen to you. I'm like, all right, I don't know if I buy that.
No, I
You know?
don't know a ton of successful people when asked what's the key to your success. They went, "Oh, I just did the law of attraction." How did you give up smoking? Law of attraction. How do you get on with your life and get into this great relationship? Oh, I just I thought about it for 5 days and it just fucking showed up. Nobody.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to happen. I mean, good things seem to happen to me that I want to have happen, but or things that need to happen. I think that's sometimes as well things that you didn't wish for that need to happen that you didn't even know you wanted.
Well, that's interesting actually, because in terms of like when you look at magic as an actual disciplined practice of action over time versus the law of attraction, we sort of seem to already have written into the code with that discipline that what you want might not show up, but what you need could be the thing that shows up.
Well, yeah, it's like that the song lyric where you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seems to be at least a somewhat more mature and realistic approach than just like, what is the thing that I want? Bring it to me. It all seems strangely materialistic to me. Like, I'm a thing and I want things to consume. That seems to be the law of attraction. With magic, it's more of a submissive. It seems to me to be more of a submissive element. Like, if I need to change in order for this intent to be aligned, then change me. Let it be so. Let it be a thing that happens. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I mean, I definitely feel that as a result of some rituals that I've done and so forth. Like I said, things happened that weren't my intent, but they were the things that needed to happen. Like I said, I felt like, you know, for whatever reason or however, you know, I don't try to explain things away. But you know, things were set in motion at certain points that made big changes that I couldn't have conceptualized that I needed.
Right.
But they were definitely beneficial and helpful. And you know, the process that you go through to get there may be very painful. But you know, that's all part of it. You know, the outcome has been better.
Right.
But I mean, there's something I wanted to actually touch on as far as magic is concerned, because I think it's interesting. A lot of the ritual and so forth that I worked with over the years was, you know, of a Germanic nature.
Okay.
And there's a concept, you know, there's Odin has two brothers, but in myth, so many times it's just they anthropomorphize a concept.
Right.
You know, like, you know, I was just reading the Aeneid, and, you know, rumor is a concept. You know, rumor becomes a goddess that like then goes and it has 1,000 tongues, and, you know, they anthropomorphize abstract concepts. And Odin has these two brothers that he murders a giant emir who's like kind of his, you know, a predecessor, a kind of chaotic form, and then makes the world from his corpse. He creates order from the violence of that act. And with his two brothers, who are their names are Vili and Ve. So it's Odin, Vili, and Ve. And they are all actually anthropomorphized concepts. And I think together they're actually kind of a magical formula. Right. Because Odin is fury, is basically what that his name is, like fury, inspiration, passion, that kind of thing. And then Vili is just will. I mean, it's just Vili. Yeah. And then Ve, it means sanctuary. And I think to initiate powerful change, and you can, whether it's by a supernatural force or whatever, I don't argue that point, but to have fury, will, and sanctity are actually they're like the three key ingredients that you have to have. It's like, well, because I was thinking about it, some things I want to change recently, and I'm like, you know, you have to have the emotion behind it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to have the emotion and so forth. The emotion has to be guided by will. You actually have to, you know, have the intent.
Mm-hmm.
And then sanctuary, like, you know, if you're going to swear on something, or if you're going to manifest something, you have to have something that means that is sacrosanct to you. And so if you have all those three components, that's actually a pretty good magical formula for initiating any kind of change in your life, you know.
That's very interesting, because I was being asked the sort of similar line of questions the other day, and we got to a point in the conversation. I quite liked the Egyptian gods and archetypes, and the guy was pressing me like, "Do you believe in gods? Do you believe in them?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not sure that ancient people before Christianity really believed the way we're supposed to be. It wasn't a naive believing. It was like, as you just said, this God represents a thing that is absolutely part of my life. There's no faith. Like, fury exists, passion exists, will exists. You can manifest, you can touch it. Or not touch it, but you know it's there right now." Similarly, I was sort of saying, I'm not sure that in the Egyptian religion, it was a literal belief in a superior being so much as, like, I don't think the world was constructed that way inside of people's heads. I don't think it was as divided as we see the world now. Like, I'm here on earth, there's a heaven where it was all kind of the same. We were in the same realm as the gods, and we were sort of manifestations of the gods' wills themselves. So then that would, well, for a start, what do you think of that? Do you think people used to believe naively, or do you think it was more they knew that these were elements of their own psychology?
Probably both. In terms of when people are making that argument, that's a very Christian frame, because they require absolute belief and literal belief in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, literally, the Bible is the Word of God. Literally, this is exactly that. And I think that, you know, I've been going through all the Greek myths and so forth recently, and there seemed to be, even in ancient times, some debate about that.
Right.
And you know, some room to move. I mean, the you know, the classical Greeks were very kind of, you know, agnostic about that. Sometimes they didn't like the way the gods were portrayed, and then maybe, I mean, Plato talked about this, and so in different forms. But, you know, whether or not, like, country people who have been brought up with, like, Odin is in the sky, I think they probably believed that. You know, like, I mean, why wouldn't they? Because especially, you don't have, you know, this scientific structure to, you know, call things into question. You know, if you're just, you know, you're simple people, and like, this is our story. I mean, that's what this all is like, this is our story of our people, and this is the way we frame the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really these gods are. And so, you know, it is hard to, there's a great, have you ever read Thomas Carlyle? He wrote a book called The Heroes and the Hero Worship in History.
Oh, no, I haven't.
But he has these great lines, fantastic lines about, you know, like, you know, to primordial man, if thunder is thunder, you know, it basically, like, thunder, you hear thunder and, like, that is God, because where does that come from? And holy shit, you know, like I mean, they lived in a world that was, they didn't have the explanations that we have.
Right.
So when the world is magnificent, big things happen, and why wouldn't it be a God?
Right.
You know, because that's the best way that they can conceptualize it. So I do think that maybe they believed, you know, some people believed it more literally, and then it may be more world weary older men who have seen some things that, you know, it maybe like, well, you know, I don't know about that, you know. So I think we have in many cases the things we have now. And the other thing is interesting about like, say, pagan religions, you know, polytheistic religions and so forth, is that, you know, they had specific cults for specific gods.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were just like, that God is my guy, that he's, and they'll just devote their whole thing to that guy, or goddess or whatever. And so it wasn't like there was an absolute church saying like, this is how you have to do it, because they'd be like, well, this cult over here is pretty, they have a good cult and good things happen to these people, so I'm going to go over and hang out with them.
Yeah.
And so I think it was very fluid.
Right. Do you think there's an external god, goddesses, gods? Do you conceptualize it as being that way, or do you think it's purely unconscious forces?
I definitely think the way what I believe personally is that I'm in touch with something.
Right.
I mean, there's certain things that I've been able to pull off in life. I'm like, I shouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah.
In terms of, that I think I'm tapped into a channel. Right. In some sense. I mean, like the way of men, like how did this artsy guy end up writing this book that then affected all these guys? I mean, certain things I'm able to hear things that are happening in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And, that's, whether that's just, my brain processes in that way. Okay, maybe. But I mean, I like to live in a slightly more poetic frame. Right. So, I definitely think that, I tap into something. Now, whether or not I don't like to go the whole way with anthropomorphizing that. Yeah. But I definitely think that these concepts are really important. I mean, lately, on stuff I've been writing, and I feel like I'm doing good work, and I feel like I'm doing God's work. Right. To some extent, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. This kind of what I'm my work right now is very conceptualized around order, and that's really what these sky fathers have always done. Mm-hmm. They create order in the world. And I think I'm doing the work of creating order. And so whatever that means, I'm not going to try and quantify that in a particular way. But, I definitely, it's, there's always a balance. Like, how much meaning are you giving to a thing, and how much does it exist beyond you? Yeah. Who knows? Who knows these things,
There seems to be a pitfall avoided by refusing to commit either way. So that I think that's where the system sort of breaks, is if you go, it's definitely all unconscious, you lose something. And if you say it's definitely all out there, you lose something. The certainty seems to kill the system a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is weird. I mean, I do some very pagan things, like there's some, when I go out to my land, I'll like, the nature god Frey, whatever, that we have the altar for, I'll cut some stuff from my yard and I'll put it on his altar, and I'll do some things that are very religious in that way, that a lot of people don't see that I do. But it would be neat to live in a world where I'm just completely literal. And you do, after a while, you start doing that stuff, and then you get kind of superstitious about it. Right. And I like that. I like that a little bit. But it is. Yeah, I mean, we do have all this information about psychology, and it's also our fate, and I talk about that a lot. It's our fate to have all this information in this world, and so we can't really go back and recreate the past anyway. Right. We can't go live in their frame. Yeah. So we have to live in this frame where we have all this information, and we have to balance it, and that's our fate, and that's our time, and we have to live in our time and get our fate.
As far as that goes, having told you I thought that Jung was crap, I got back into Jung through Nietzsche, and he expanded on a lot of the Nietzschean concepts of just how much we lost when we lost God, when we lost religion, and actually did some pretty awesome predicting of where we're up to now in 2020 as far as that goes. So we can't go back naively and have an old frame, but do you think it would be useful if we tried? Would it be globally useful for everybody if we tried to bring some of these concepts back into modern culture, do you think?
As far as, I'm definitely against the idea that something that's good for everybody, something that's good for someone has to be for everybody. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the magic of the modern world, is that we don't all have to have the same frame. And really, they didn't have that in ancient times. I mean, you had all these different religions and countries, and they had all these different forms, and they were competing with each other and so forth. And so I think that's natural, and that's the way it should be. And that, And if you don't have that, then you have this, this empire of nothing, this monoculture where we all, so I don't want everyone to believe what I believe. I'm not into that.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think for people who aren't in a different frame, like people who are in a Christian frame, if that's working for them, that's great. Be in that frame. But my project that I'm working on now is actually, pulling together some of these archetypes of the hero and the creation of order and so forth, and bringing them back into life for people who feel like a piece is missing. Because there are a lot of guys who, become very accomplished as men or whatever, and they're looking for a spiritual piece. Yeah. But nothing really satisfies that because, there is that mix between science and religion and so forth. And, there are guys who, Christianity or some other form satisfies that. And then I think there are a lot of other people, a lot of other guys who are like, well, I'm not really into that, but they're looking for something. And that's why I think that the idea of, these ancient hero myths and so forth, things that men really connect with, are things that can become religious for you on levels that are, I think there's three approaches to it. You can do it from a totally intellectual and just say, these are nothing but symbols. You can do it from an agnostic perspective, like maybe, or you could go a little further for it, which I kind of, not to be confused with actual Gnosticism, but, because that's its own thing, but more of a Gnostic approach where like, well, based on my experiences, I feel like I've experienced this and therefore I believe it, but I don't really send people as far as full literal belief.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I can honestly set that up for people.
Right.
But I do think that you can get to a point where you do these things enough that you have some kind of Gnostic spirituality that's attached to them.
That's interesting. I'm wondering if that's, I didn't mean to, but possibly where I've ended up myself is like through just being open and through certain experiences, I go, yeah, well, there's obviously something afoot here that goes beyond the descriptions of science, modern culture and everything else. And I've wondered, I try to pin down what it is that we lost. And it seems to be something along the lines of an idea of a higher force beyond ourselves. Because when we stick ourselves up on the altar, things seem to go horribly wrong. When it's just us and no other higher force, we get a bit weird.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what, I did a poll one time of, because everybody says they want spirituality. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
What does spirituality mean?
Yeah.
And that's really what people, something bigger than them.
Right.
Is what they mean when you actually have them explain it, and they'll put it in different words or whatever, but they're looking for something, a connection to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah. The apart from that sort of acknowledgement of a higher force, something bigger than themselves, I was wondering maybe it's the discipline. You mentioned will and also sanctity, so maybe a bit of reverence, and just not a cunt of an attitude to the world. Do you know what I mean? Because people develop a cunt of an attitude to the world that's full of contempt and like, well, we figured it all out. Fuck nature. Fuck the world. Fuck, who cares about the stars? Fuck the stars. You go, well, we haven't quite figured it all out. Settle down a bit there.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that it's become its own religion. This idea that we've figured everything out, because we really don't know a lot of things. And the thing is, people talk about science as if it's settled, and that's not what science is. It's not supposed to be settled, really. I mean, obviously, okay, fire is hot. We got that. There's certain things that are realities, but that they've figured out. But there's a lot that we don't know, and the truths of 10 years ago are not the truths of today. Whether it's health related stuff is notoriously, like, here's what's good for you this month. And then the next month, and then they say, oh, well, actually, it really isn't that good for you.
Yeah.
They do more studies and figure out something else. So like to stay, there's that phrase ex cathedra, which is, as the Pope speaks, his word is the word of God. And people do that with science. And we've seen that a lot with the epidemics and so forth recently, where it's like, oh, well, a scientist said it and I follow science.
Right.
You might as well be talking to a pope at that point. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what has been proven, you know, in that situation has been very much like, actually they had no idea what they were talking about
Right.
3/4 of the time.
Yeah.
They're like, here's my best guess of what's going on, and
Yeah.
people take that as absolute truth, and that's not the case. And what's also interesting about the science people is that they then they end up looking for aliens. You know, they end up, oh, I didn't even plan on it. I didn't even try that. We got back to aliens, like we talked about the other day. We were going to end up at aliens, but um, no, I mean, that's what people who really love science, and they end up searching for extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
Because they still are looking for something that came before them that tells them what the meaning of life is.
So they effectively become the new priesthood, right? They're looking for aliens, and they're looking for the basic building block of reality, the Higgs boson particle. And then there's this whole problem of consciousness. So we're all talking to each other with these ideas that are absolute ideas. And you say, but they're just like, the fact that they're ideas, we have no idea what ideas are. We have no idea what consciousness is, no idea where it comes from, what its purpose is.
Right.
Apart from all the other natural phenomena that we pretend we understand, but we don't really, gravity, magnetism, you know, things like that, we don't really get. There seems to be something, at least psychologically utilitarian, in the humility of, say, if you do ritual and you don't know exactly, ritual I think implies that you don't get an absolute definite result. It's partly faith-based, right? You're engaged in a ceremony hoping or expecting that something will come back, but there's no way of knowing. There's a humility in that.
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, ritual actually, I mean, it means the right or proven way. So it really means, you know, they've, you know, whether it's ancient Roman or whatever, it's like, this is the way we do it.
Okay.
And a ritual is actually, so the rituals that I do are experimental. So they, in many ways, I guess, aren't a ritual because they're not like, we're not doing it the same way over time.
Sure.
Because I'm doing things in a very experimental way.
Yeah.
But you know, that is the meaning of that. And so when you have priests doing a tradition for like hundreds of years, the exact same way, it's designed to create a certain outcome.
Right.
And so they, you know, then you obviously follow up. It's the will of the gods. Whatever is the will of the gods is really what you're coming down to anyway. So it's
absolutely. And I think Bruce Lee would have had an answer with that. He would have said, but the way is in having no way. You know, that's actually the correct ritual, is to feel it out as an artist, as a poet, as somebody dealing with myth, as somebody who maintains a sense of humor, because you don't seem like somebody to me who would be very pompous and didactic and like, this is the absolute. You kind of have a sense of humor about it as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to lie. Yeah. I'm a terrible liar. And I don't feel like I can say something in that way. And it's very tempting because then people look to you for that.
Yes.
And I could do that. You know, I could say, this is, I mean, there's so many dudes on the internet who like, oh my God, you know, their videos are like, I have found the secret of blah, blah, blah. And I know the true way, and it's been revealed to me. And yeah, you could, all right. You know, to me, that's a snake oil salesman. And I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm going to talk as honestly as I can. And obviously that involves a sense of humor, because you have to be able to laugh at yourself. You know?
Because it's that there is no guaranteed outcome. And as you said, you know, you're not firing fireballs out of your hands. So how?
Yet.
I was going to ask you, we've never talked about psychedelics, have we?
No.
Have you done them?
Yeah.
Did they form a part of, did they have an impact on your worldview?
I wouldn't say necessarily, but as far as like mushrooms or something like that go, I think that you know, like many things, they can give you ideas that maybe you wouldn't have thought of otherwise, because your brain's working in a different way. Mm-hmm. So you can send you down a different path, and maybe you'll figure out something else that you wouldn't have thought of in another way. And they do rewire your brain to a certain extent. There's, you know, a lot of that, which is very interesting, especially with microdosing and so forth. But I definitely, I've used that stuff. People always ask me if I do that during ritual, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
because I have to be in charge.
Right.
You know,
Tripping balls.
yeah, I can't be like on the ground giggling. You know, I have to have my shit together. But I do think they're useful. I think in a meditative and intentional way. You know, like, you know, rather than necessarily like the fun way.
Right.
You know, I think that if, you know, that's something that people can definitely do and explore.
I took acid a lot in my teens. I'd read like William S. Burroughs and Terence McKenna and Robert Anton Wilson, and I thought I had trauma. I was fucked up, and I thought, oh, if I can force an enlightenment, I won't be stuck in this shitty world anymore. But
Right.
it didn't work. but
What you mean doing a bunch of drugs didn't have a good outcome?
not massively. But one of the things it did, there were certain themes that kept on coming up again and again, and I think it sort of led me back to magic. And when I say magic, I mean the full scope, like all religions. To me, all religions are magical. Like, people shout at me and go, "You shouldn't be talking about magic. You should be a good Christian like me." And worship the Palestinian Jewish rabbi who dies and rises from the dead and heal people with his hands. You hate magic. Is that what you're telling me, right?
Right.
And I sort of came back around to it because in the acid trips, which were all pretty bad, the themes were like the nature of reality and the Garden of Eden and what are humans. And have you got any thoughts about like the origins of humanity, that kind of thing? Have you ever had any psychedelic experiences around that? Or
No, I mean, I think there's a temptation, and I don't know exactly what it is, but you know, a lot of people get led to this. We're all one, man.
Yeah.
Like by their experiences, and that in many ways, you know, like I was just talking about, all the gods are the same. You know, like in many ways, a lot of things are related and so forth. But I think you can go too far down a path with that because then you become undifferentiated. And then what's the point of you?
yeah,
Like,
why exist?
what's the point of being you? Like, you know, like I don't really want to be one with everything. I want to be Jack Donovan because I like that guy.
I actually had the opposite experience with acid, where it said that we were all humans. We were actually different alien races, strands of different. This is my acid talking. I don't actually believe this, but this is what I saw. Different strands of alien races in sort of like a power battle. Some were reptiles, some were mammals, some were this, some were that, and it actually, that's one of the things that stuck with me from the acid experiences. You mentioned aliens before. I do have a suspicion that we are the aliens. We're not from this planet. We don't seem to, you know, cats walk around naked. They eat what they see. They lie down, they fall asleep, they get up, they take a shit, and it just deteriorates. We're not like that. We don't seem to fit into the environment in the same way. Jack Donovan, do you think we're aliens?
Again, aliens and God, like all these religions just say that we're like the children of God, right. And it's the same thing. So what is an alien but a god? Because it's right. Something that lives in space, yeah. and then seeded the world, yeah. Right? I mean, it's all the same stuff. So like, you know, anyone who believes in God really is, you know, okay, we're part of an alien thing,
right?
You know, so I mean, I don't have any, and also the weird thing is that aliens don't really answer the questions that people want them to, because okay, who made the aliens?
Yeah,
you know, like it's a never-ending loop that you get stuck into anyway. So it really doesn't solve the question, because like, oh well, the aliens made us. Now I understand the nature of reality. Oh wait, where the aliens come from?
Yeah.
You know, and so like it's a never-ending thing anyway. So I mean, I try not to like concentrate on unsolvable problems.
Right. The way that I went through a similar process, I came to the same conclusion, but it was like, okay, so the aliens, how far away from this solar system do you have to be considered an alien? Because to those aliens, they might be like, well, no, we're in the same sector, you dickhead. We're not foreign to each other. Those guys over there, you need to travel another 10,000. They're the fucking aliens, but we're not aliens. Yeah. We're homies. And I was like,
Yeah.
shit.
The Klingons. It's the Klingons.
They're the fucking aliens.
They're different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the rest of us are brothers, but those guys with the
Right.
fucking
Yeah,
foreheads,
yeah.
they're not cool. And I the same thing. I came to the same conclusion, which is like, this is not really sharp thinking. This is rather, like you say, closed loop thinking. You can't, it doesn't go any further than wondering about the nature of gods and goddesses. Really, it's the same. As you say, it becomes the same question, really. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, sir, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this today?
Nothing off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, ladies and gents, I highly recommend Jack's work. If you go to jack-donovan.com or his Instagram, which is Start the World.
Start the World. And I probably talk more about these kind of things on Instagram than anywhere else.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of Jack's usually posting stuff out daily, and it's really good content. Jack, thank you very much for coming on today, mate.
No problem, man. Good to talk to you.
Excellent. Okay. Right. That has stopped recording.